Hello, and welcome to the first ever Secret Report. I'm Karlo, the Dungeon Master for Whisper of Winter 2, Requiem of the Chained King, and this video is essentially designed to recap all the lore, background, villains, plot details, and characters in the campaign. It details the dynamic relationships between all the villains, and the backstories written for each character, and how the world of Exandria interacts with them. It'll be separated into parts as well to make the video more concise and to the point. With that out of the way, let's begin a deep dive into the secret report for Whisper of Winter 2. It starts with Godric Sealy, the esteemed elven prince of Queen Titania and King Oberon. Putting on a facade as the noble and respectful prince, he secretly thirsted for power. The man wanted enough power to overthrow his parents and become the king of the Feywild. One winter's night, he whispered his desire into the air, not expecting any response, but one came. Unbeknownst to him, the chained oblivion spoke to him in whispers, giving him commands and directing him to build an army. And that's exactly what Sir Godric Sealy began to do. He began amassing as many followers as he could for his cause. Traveling the Feywild under the guise of a business trip, he spoke to as many creatures as he could and formed all manner of pacts and contracts. He gathered centaurs, fellow elves, dryads, nymphs, pixies, and elementals to his side. But he knew that without lieutenants, he could never command all of his followers on his own. And from there, Godric returned home to Seneliez with all the pacts made and continued planning his rebellion. The first lieutenant Godric ever recruited to his side was a woman who died long before his time. Historically, vampires have been the natural enemies to those in the Sealy court. When Godric read of Delilah Briarwood and her accolades, he grew a morbid curiosity. Through clever manipulation and trickery, he deceived his own mother into fashioning a new body for the mad necromancer, and with this, Delilah Briarwood was reborn into a vampiric body. Upon revival, Godric offered to form a pact with her, promising endless power, gold, and whatever she wished for. Though she initially resisted, the woman joined Godric's side at the promise of reunion with her husband, Silas. She became his first lieutenant. Then, Godric met Xigbar, a sharpshooter from a land far away with an eye patch, a purple stripe through his hair, and a black cloak. Godric never trusted the sharpshooter. They met for the first time in Whitestone, alone and in secrecy. The sharpshooter's inclination towards being a wild card was initially off-putting towards Godric, but he could not deny the man's skill and the respect that he commanded. Xigbar agreed to help Godric with whatever he needs, on one condition. Godric is to help Xigbar collect both Lucas Tanjiro and Crystalina Star. Godric agrees, and Xigbar becomes his second lieutenant. From here, Godric continues traveling Exandria and other planes to continue building his army. When he traveled down to the Nine Hells, he met a tiefling woman named Moriah. He offered her endless power and magic beyond her imagination for her services. She did not hesitate to agree. Godric spent some time in the Nine Hells in the shadows, avoiding detection from the Fire Queen Hilera and her wife Anya, working out plans with Moriah and talking strategy. Godric began to develop romantic feelings towards her, and believed her to feel the same. However, this wouldn't turn out to be true. Though her true feelings were concealed from him, he returned to the material plane with the promise of returning to her, and giving her more commands to undermine Hilera and Anya's throne while he was away. he arrived back to Exandria, initially content with the amount of lieutenants and commanders behind him now. That is, until he was tracked by a woman named Astrid Beck. Impressed by how powerful of a witch she was and her tracking capabilities, he invited her to join his conquest. She agreed to do so, but let him know of her bounty hunter nature to flip loyalty for the highest coin. Godric paused for mere minutes before agreeing to allow her to join. And with that, Godric had his followers and his lieutenants behind him, and he began his Feywild rebellion. There once lived a human man named Sabin Hext. He was one of the most powerful monks to grace Wildmount and lived with his wife, Emiko, training several students at his monastery. One fateful night, the man's monastery fell under attack. Those responsible were the impatient followers of Godric Sealy. As they could not wait for him to come back to the material plane, they let out their rage on their violent tendencies, and so Sabin's monastery fell under attack. It was led by a man named Akira Ravenheart. Sabin's students joined the fight and defended the monastery. Eventually, as the battle reached a stalemate, Sabin and Akira agreed to a duel with a wager. If Sabin won, Akira would leave, but if Akira won, Sabin would surrender and allow Akira to do whatever he likes with him, on the condition that his students live. Emiko, his wife, felt concerned, but confident in her husband's strength. A duel ensued. A long clash between Akira Ravenheart and Sabin Hext commanded the attention of both the students of the monastery and Godric's followers, commanded by Akira. Ravenheart proved to be a strong opponent, incorporating the power of the four elements into his martial arts. Sabin also kept up the fight, however, using Akira's strength against him. In the end, the two men battled for about an hour before the fight ended and the men killed each other. Their bodies clattered against the floor. Godric's followers retreated and Sabin's students rushed to help their master. Emiko, emotionally distraught, attempted to do what she could, but she would ultimately be too late to prevent her husband's untimely demise, and she swore vengeance on Akira. Sabin's soul wandered the prime material plane for years before moving on, whereas Akira Ravenheart's soul was thrown into the bottom pits of Tartaros to be forgotten about and tossed aside. Zelron Duthana, son of Hilera and Anya, and heir to the throne of fire in the city of Dis within the Nine Hells, was once a soul hunter. He rarely left his home, but when he did, he frequently visited Port Soon to meet up and hang out with the kids of Stamos and Razir. In his free time, he wandered Wildmount and beyond, hunting rogue souls and sending them to the Nine Hells to be punished. On one fateful evening, he came across the soul of Sabin Hext. Learning his story and realizing he had been wronged, Zelron agreed to a deal with him. Sabin would teach him in the ways of martial arts, and in return, Sabin's soul would not be tortured. And so, the two began Zelron's training. Fenkayan, the son of Stamos and Razir, once met a man named Phoenix, who had been raised by the wolves in the forest, in contrast to Fenkayan's noble upbringing. The two, over time, fell in love. They would never be seen too far from one another. Fenkayan organized a crew and commanded a ship for himself and his husband to travel and see the world and all of its wonders. And as they sailed off from Port Zun, they traveled all around Exandria. That was, until they had been caught in a storm. Their ship was attacked due to the high-value target on board, the prince. Unbeknownst to them, the assailant was Godric himself, who aimed to take out Fenkayan, seeing him as a threat to all he hopes to achieve. Both boys in the end survived, but became separated from each other. Phoenix washed up upon a beach, whereas Fenkayan was nowhere to be found. With nothing left to do, Phoenix returned to Port Zune and donned the disguise of his husband, Fenkayan. He deceived everyone with this disguise, including Stemos, Razur, and his grandfather, King Krestos. With no sign of his husband's return, Phoenix, disguised as the prince, tried to ignore the feelings in the back of his mind that his love was out there. Somewhere. Mystra, the goddess of magic and lady of spells, in a way, served as the second line of defense for the Divine Gate. After the first calamity, the gods and primordials agreed that being present on the material plane was too much of a danger to the mortals, and so they constructed the Divine Gate to prevent any gods from crossing into Exandria. Mystra also constructed the Great Balance. It served as not only a second line of defense to keep out the gods and primordials, but also kept creatures from leaving their home plane. This way, demons and devils could never launch large-scale invasions. And if they ever did find a way around it, Mystra would be the first to know. Mystra didn't feel she could always uphold the Great Balance on her own, however. For this, she appointed a mortal with a special role, the Vox Arcanorum, or the Voice of Magic. This voice would be responsible for continuous upkeep of the Great Balance, the Weave, where all magic is drawn from, and ensuring that no spells are cast above 9th level. The first ever Vox Arcanorum in recorded history was a woman who lived after the time of the first calamity, named Irene Winterhold. She served Mystra in whatever she needed and tended to the Great Balance and the Weave. In modern times, a princess named Adelaide Dwendal lived as sister to Freya and daughter to King Bertrand Dwendal and Queen Duvia Dwendal. Ever since Adelaide was young, she had frequent blackouts and times when she would wake up from these blackouts to see horrific sights. She would always be excused from her classes for this as well. One fateful night, she awoke to see a sight that changed her life. On waking from this blackout, her sister was dead. Her parents blamed her for Freya's death, and Adelaide ran away. She took on a new name, Mona Renat. Cutting ties with her family, she began a new life for herself. The reason behind Adelaide's blackouts and her sister's death? It was Mystra. She chose the princess as the Vox Arcanorum without Adelaide's knowledge. The blackouts were times when Mystra tried to get her attention, but ended up taking full control and causing chaos because of being in an unfamiliar body. She wanted to tell Adelaide the truth as soon as it happened, but when her sister died, she wondered if it was too late. Lucas Tanjiro, the son of Jason Tanjiro, was taken in by Allura Vysoren, who served as his mentor. She kept a watchful eye on him and protected him while he dealt with his regrets and learned to fight for the proper side. Lucas came from a land far away and told Allura his past. He had been commanded by the Cult of Shadows, had his body and heart stolen, and turned into Kolsax and the Beowulf. With this, he tore rifts in multiple worlds, drowning them in chaos and darkness. Because of this, he felt out of control and needed a guiding figure in his life. Jason Tanjiro, his father, pushed for him to learn from Allura and for her to guide him in whatever he needed. Allura agreed. One fateful night, Lucas met Xigbar. The sharpshooter arrived in Vysoren's tower and made him a deal. Xigbar wanted Lucas to bring Kristalina to him, and in return, Xigbar would keep quiet about Lucas's time as Kolsax and the Beowulf. If Lucas said no, Xigbar would speak up and attempt to ruin Lucas's reputation as a warrior. With that, Xigbar disappeared and gave time for Lucas to think on the offer. Kristalina Star, friend to Lucas, would soon arrive in Exandria via dream traveling. She crashed into Alora's tower and joined the group, agreeing to help Lucas fight for the right side, and ensuring him that she would always be there, whether he liked it or not. A loyal friend, Crystalina Star, made her strength his, and swore to protect him against those who would continue to manipulate him in the future. In the northern region of Wildmount lived 13 dragons, each named after a constellation. The leader of this flight of dragons was Pisces, the adult black dragon. There is one dragon that Pisces never fully trusted, named Draco. He kept a close eye on Draco's movements, actions, and whereabouts. Draco was aware of this, however, and, at a meeting with all 13 dragons, called him out for it. Questioning Pisces' suspicion of him, he called into question his trust for any of the dragons. If he could spy on Draco, who else would he spy on? And so, the group was torn apart by this conflict. Half of the dragons took Pisces' side, believing Draco to require supervision and that he would betray them any day now. The other half stood against Pisces, questioning if he really needed to watch Draco that closely, or if he's just ignoring all the other major threats to the dragons. In this secret conflict, the dragons battled, and only half of the group survived the Battle of the Zodiac. The soul of one Ophiuchus would be fused with an artifact known as the Dragon Blade. Godric gave a direct order to Moriah to release Akira Ravenheart from Tartaros to see if he knew anything about Tharizdun and gauge his interest on joining the group. When she did so, Akira did not listen to reason. He tore through all the layers of hell and determined in his mind to destroy everything in his way of global conquest. Seeing the destruction he caused, Moriah aided in the war effort against Akira and was ultimately successful in throwing him back into Tartaros. When Godric learned of this betrayal, he removed Moriah from the team and allowed her soul to burn in Tartaros, directly next to Akira. Lord Drakion of Zadash had a plan for the future. He wanted to develop drones, not only for the purpose of civil defense, but also for quicker delivery of items. He wanted magic items and potions to be shipped quickly and developed his company, known now as Excalibur. He presented his ideas of 48-hour shipments through a service named Excalibur Prime. He also promised better entertainment through this service, and many citizens flocked to support his new business venture. However, there was one incident that none of the public knew about. Drakion was the first to find Fenkayan, the true prince, on that beach. Barely alive, he decided the prince would be a fitting experiment. He took Fenkayan to Zadash and experimented on him, modifying the prince's body against his will. Fenkayan's case was not an isolated one. Several citizens over the course of 7 weeks would be kidnapped and experimented on within the laboratories of Excalibur, all happening while he garnered more and more support for this brilliant business venture. With Moriah off the team, Godric felt it was time to do more research and find out who else he could recruit. He read about a man who tried to play God named Karsus. Learning of his exploits of Mystra and the casting of Karsus' avatar and subsequently Karsus' folly, he grew intrigued. He knew he could not ask his mother to fashion a new body for Karsus, being enemies in warfare now, but Godric fashioned a body for Karsus independently and became his second in command, so long as Karsus could gather the supplies and casters needed to cast Karsus' avatar once again on Tharizdun, the Chained Oblivion, and free him, granting Godric and his followers everlasting, eternal power. Through clever tactics and enduring battles where odds were stacked against them, the party eliminated all of Godric's lieutenants. Tracking down Karsus to a city named Grim Golir, they defeated him and drove a sword into his head. However, upon this, they heard the sound of chains breaking. This was Godric's plan B. His plan A was to take his followers, overthrow Titania and Oberon, and then do the same for all of the Prime Material Plane. The party foiled his plans, and as a result, Godric resorted to plan B. If he can't release one betrayer god, he can release all of them. And so, with the death of Karsus, the divine gate was broken, and the gods and primordials were released into Exandria once again, directly starting the second calamity. Exandria struggled as a society to survive, while the betrayer gods picked them up like paper dolls and destroyed nearly half of all civilization. Though they've been putting up a fight and eliminating more pressing threats, Tharizdun, the chained oblivion, the great nothing, the darkness between the stars, devoured nearly the entirety of Exandria, swallowing Taldore, Wildmount, and Marquette into eternal darkness. The only remaining city was the Dawn Cradle, Vasselheim. That is where Tharizdun plans to make his last stand and destroy everything, returning the universe to the state of being that it once was before existence dawned. Tharizdun, the chained oblivion, sings its requiem into the darkness, for it knows that even it will not survive in the nothing, but a worthy sacrifice in its shattered, incomprehensible mind to have the universe shaped exactly the way it was meant to be. Why did Emiko hate Delilah Briarwood? Emiko's first son, Hinata, was one of the 8 people hung at the Sun Tree by Delilah Briarwood. Why did Godric trust Astrid, but not Xigbar? Godric had no reason to trust Xigbar, having no idea where he came from. It was his being impressed by Astrid's tracking abilities that earned her his trust. How was Alora tracked and killed? Alora Vysoren's death required careful planning and strategy on Godric's part, so Godric knew that Xigbar had to deal the final blow. Although the party had been tracking Xigbar's movements for a while, their opposition were as well. Astrid, an impressive magical tracker, kept a very close eye on the movements of specifically Alora Vysoren, even though she was at her tower where a magical barrier was present which prevents her from being tracked. Astrid knew exactly how to bypass that magic barrier. From there, it was a matter of traveling there and taking her life. Why did Alora have to be killed before Xigbar got to the rest of the party? Alora served as Lucas's mentor and protector. The greatest threat in Xigbar's eyes to hunting the wolf and stealing the star was Alora Vysoren. She knew how to develop anti-teleportation devices and how to track his movements. Even in death, she was one of the major reasons for his downfall. In the Battle of Vysoren's Tower, anti-magic devices kept Xigbar, Godric, and Astrid forced to confront their enemies, and as such, Lucas finally removed Xigbar from Exandria. What exactly happened to Darkfang? Astrid tossed it into a demiplane. Knowing that Lucas could summon it and could feel it moving to another plane of existence, it was a form of psychological torment that Astrid used to try to get to Lucas and crack his mental. She knew that there would be a confrontation in the tower, and Lucas and his friends would try to avenge Vysoren, but she didn't care about her own safety, or Godric's, or Xigbar's. She was going to have her fun her way. Laughing in the face of someone who lost a loved one is Astrid's style. Why did the Master of Masters take Xigbar away from Exandria? So the Master of Masters sent Xigbar to Exandria in the first place to see if interdimensional travel was at all possible, and if it is, if it could be done safely. The second step was to collect Crystallina Star and use her as a key or vessel to ensure safe interdimensional traveling, as she has done multiple times through her dreams. When the Master of Masters saw Xigbar's ultimate failure and near death in the Battle of Vysoren's Tower, he called the experiment over. Xigbar is a very important piece on the chessboard for the Master of Masters after all. He can't lose him now. Why was Ursus at the Tournament of Dragons? The Ursus seen in the Tournament of Dragons is not the actual Ursus, but a copy. Xigbar reported getting to Exandria safely to the Master of Masters, and he wanted to try it for himself, but didn't want to take the risk of Xigbar not telling the truth. As such, he created a clone of Ursus and sent him to Exandria. Ursus tormenting Lucas and controlling the dragons was not in the Master's plan, but he didn't mind. It gave Lucas more of a challenge, and he thought it would soften him up for Xigbar to collect him at a later time. And besides, plans deviate all the time. And that's it. That's all the lore, villains, and story events explained up to this point in the campaign. So come catch the ending to our campaign at twitch.tv/Swinging Swordsman on December 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and see the party take on Tharizdun, the Chain of Oblivion. Thank you so much for watching this video and listening to me explain the lore I made for my silly Dungeons & Dragons game. It really means the world to me. And it would mean even more if you were to like the video and subscribe to our channel. You know, we've been putting in so much work to this game, you know, not just me, but my players. So we would just really appreciate if you would hit that subscribe button and like the video. Oh, and before you go, I want to plug a couple things. So first of all, I've just released my very first game project. It's called Project Astro, and it is available for download for Windows at this time. It's a top-down shoot-'em-up in the style of classic arcade shooters. It's got 50 waves of different types of enemies, including shooters, kamikazes, kitsune, and a sun boss. So if that sounds up your alley, give it a go. Tell me what you think. There's a download link in the description right now. Check it out and let me know. And if you're a student like myself, school can be very, very stressful right now. Finals are this week, folks, so make sure you get your studying done and get that information memorized. And while you're at it, listen to some tunes that help you stay motivated and productive. For me, lo-fi always does the trick. Check out my brother Nico's awesome lo-fi mix over on YouTube under the name Lo-Fi Beats. That's Beetz. Some of his stuff is also on Spotify. Link will be in the description. Alright, for real this time, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. See ya.